Hi team.
Hey Hariom! Welcome to Cloud Pathshala.
Thank you.
Hey Aarya, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi guys, this is Cloud Pathshala signing in. I am Salman and with me you have Pranay and Hariom cross the table. So we are going to have a beautiful session today on performance monitoring for Windows. So without wasting a time, let's directly go to Pranay and Hariom and see what we have in our bucket today.
So before proceeding to the technical sessions, Hariom, do you want to put any inputs here, like what you are going to present and how like a system admin can get benefit from this?
Yes, Parne. So today we will talk about the performance monitoring, which is one of the topic which is most important for anybody in IT world, be it a fresher or any experienced guy. So if you are not aware how to monitor the performance, you can never troubleshoot the issues which are there with any system. So today we are going to cover performance.
So you mean to say that like performance is a performance monitoring, right?
Right.
So let's take example. I am working in an IT environment and I do not have any kind of monitoring tool which automates the monitoring system. So I can do such things from performance. You were talking, right? This is something like this.
Yes, exactly. The majority of the system which run in environment are Windows based, Microsoft based, and we have this free tool installed on all the Microsoft provided the OS. So you can use this freeware tool inbuilt in OS, and it will be very much helpful for the performance monitoring observations.
So as you mentioned that Windows environment, let's take example. I am a Linux admin. So can I use this performance, or it is specific to Windows?
No, this particular topic which we are going to cover, that is for Windows machines only, Windows 2008 server, Windows 2012 server, or be it the client side Windows 7, Windows XP and all those versions.
Alright, so my next question is that might be a silly question or not related to technically. Like I am a Windows admin and I want to use performance. So is it there is any cost involved if I already have a Windows server? So is there any cost involved if I want to use this performance tool?
No, Parne, there is no cost involved. As I already said, it's an inbuilt tool with the every Windows OS machine. So that is completely free for anybody who is using that Windows Microsoft OS.
Okay, and if I am a new to IT industry and I just jump to doing the troubleshooting of Windows environment, so how quickly I can learn this? So
yeah, exactly, that is what I will cover in the session today, how you can use that tool, how to perform the performance monitoring, how to capture the result, and how to make use out of those outputs.
Oh, yeah. So it means that you are going to cover a lot of things here, so that session is going to be very interesting, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So guys, let me introduce Hariom here. He is a Windows expert and he's already have around 12 years of experience, and he is working with one of the US based MNC and already doing such things in a live environment. So let's jump to the technical deep dive session, and he is going to present here. Salman, you have anything before he start his session?
So like Hariom, we would like to know like how I can be benefited from this.
Yeah, sure. So Salman, if there is anything going wrong in environment, so the very first thing which is there we need to troubleshoot, it's the event log, services log, what is going on that server, or if it is related to performance and performance is impacted, then definitely we have to go to some tool with which we can monitor what is going wrong with the performance on that system. So that is something we are going to cover today.
Okay. So guys, this is one of the important tool which every system administrator should know. And not wasting a time, we are directly moving to our labs where he's going to show us. So you are going to show us a practical, or you will be showing us a PPT?
Yeah, so we have a whiteboard and we have PPT as well.
Very well said. Like Hariom, it's a performance monitoring tool which we use in Windows. Like most of the system administrators sees on daily basis, they see a performance issue with their servers. So today we are going to learn how we can sort out those issues, how we can find out the cause and eliminate the problem in our environment and make it as a seamless working for the environment.
Hi viewers, so today we are going to cover the performance monitoring topic today. So as discussed with Pranay and Salman, this particular tool is inbuilt in every Microsoft Windows OS, and we can make use of it, and we can we can perform the tasks which are basically being used for the troubleshooting purpose, for the performance related to any server, be it Windows 2008, 2012, 2003, or which is already end of life now. So any kind of any version of Microsoft Windows OS has this tool inbuilt with OS, and we can make use of it for the performance monitoring. So as far as the audience, this particular tool is something which is very much required for the fresher or be it the experienced person, because if we do not know how to know if there is something wrong with the performance, we can never know what exactly is to troubleshoot, and how if there is anything wrong with the components like memory or network card or CPU or storage, say SSD, hard disk drive. So these are the basic components with any hardware and OS. Once we install the OS, and if there is any issue, performance issue, that can be related to the component or the configuration settings or of the OS. So this particular tool, we can set the counters, and we can export the details with those counters, that which particular is that area where we need to concentrate and where exactly is the issue, be it network side or storage side or memory or CPU, any kind of component. So once we generate the output, once we set the counter, then we have to take output in some manner where we can we can make best use of it, and that is where the Excel comes very handy. So we will also discuss how to generate the graphs, pivot graphs, once we have the output of this particular monitoring tool in Excel, how to export in Excel, and then how to generate the graphs to know exactly what is wrong with the components. And also, in case there is something major issues and we have the bottleneck situation, which we are going to discuss what exactly is bottleneck. So probably I'll show you the slide, and I'll describe and explain each and every point which we have to cover today in the session which we are going to cover on the PPT now. Hello guys, so let's move on to the slides now which we have prepared for this session. So the first slide, it says about our contact points. So we have admin@cloudpathshala.com, and if you have any queries after this session, then or you have any suggestion, then you can definitely email us and we will get back to you. You can also follow us on social media. So you just make it @cloudpathshala.com or www.cloudpathshala.com. So we have availability over Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those social media portals. So you can find us there as well. Thank you. So let's move on to next slide. So when we discuss the performance monitoring for any Windows server, so just imagine that any fine day you are coming to your office, and one of the guy who is there, who says that there is something wrong with this particular server, application server or maybe infrastructure server, and the performance is badly hampered, and he is not able to do anything on that server. And maybe there can be scenarios that it's not the performance is not okay for a particular point of time, or maybe it's continuous problem with that server. So to overcome all those situation and how to see what exactly is the issue with the performance of that particular server, we have this tool which is Performon tool, and which we will discuss today for Windows Server. So we will discuss how to set up counters and collect the data for analysis. We will also discuss how to how to set the limits, threshold limit for those counters, and what exactly we have to measure and when we have to measure. We will also discuss about the bottlenecks like hard disk bottleneck, memory, processor, or network bottleneck. So when we say bottleneck, bottleneck is the position situation where we do not have any bandwidth for the resources on any particular server. So just to see if that is related to any component which is installed on this on that particular server, we have to see which particular component is creating issues. So that is something we will know in coming slides. Okay guys, so the very first thing, how to open this tool. So the very first thing is that if you are logged into any server, you just go to start, click on start, and go to run and type perfmon.msc, perfmon.msc or perfmon, and that it will open up the perfmon monitoring box for you as shown in the slide below. Or you can go to start, control panel, administrative tools, and then performance monitor, and you will get the same window there for the performance monitoring. So as this particular slide shows the example how this tool will look like once you will open this tool. Okay, so let's move on. Before we move on, just one point that all those graphs which you see there in this particular tool, these are the real-time monitoring of that particular server where you have opened that perfmon tool. Okay, so the counters, when we say the counters, which particular counters we have to set to study for the performance monitoring of any particular server where we are running with the issues. So that is something that depends, the load depends on the business requirements, right? So just for an example, if anybody come to you and says that this particular server, the issue comes only on Monday or say Wednesday, and that is for 1 or 2 hours, then you have to observe that when we have to run the performance monitoring. So what you can do, you can also schedule the monitoring for those particular time period when the user normally observe that those issues. So just to ensure that whenever you run those counters, you run those monitoring performance monitoring tool, that system should be in working state. You cannot make use of this tool if that is completely hung and you are not able to open anything. So systems should be working, but yes, if there is a performance issue, then we will make use of this tool. Let's move on to next slide, and I'll show you that how to define the data collector sets. So as I said earlier, that there can be multiple components like memory, network card, or CPU, or storage, say hard disk drive, or any other configuration related settings which are there for on any particular OS server. So for all those particular component, we can have the different type of collector sets. So just for an example, this particular screenshot, you can see once you have the performance monitoring tool open, you will go to data collector sets, and you need to choose the option user defined, which is marked with an arrow, red arrow there in the left hand side panel. So once you will click on user defined and right click, and you will right click and you will go to new and then data collector set. So a new data collector set window will open there, where you have to put in the name. For example, in this slide, I just entered data collector set and my name as Hariom. So here you can pick any name which is suitable for your condition. For example, there is an particular business application which is impacted, so you can put in whatever name you require there. Then there's second option, which is create from a template. That is basically for the freshers or the users who do not know what exactly how exactly we need to configure all those data collector sets. but here I have choose the create manually and advanced settings, because I will explain you that which particular counters we need to set and how to set, right? So let's move on to next slide, which will be the next option while we are configuring the data collector sets. So we are going with create manually and advanced option. Okay, so in the next slide, once you will click on the data collector set and your next, so it will show you this window which will be asking for the create data logs for performance counter, event trace data, or system configuration information. So as you said, we in this particular session we are talking about the performance for any Windows server. So to get the performance related data, what is going wrong, we have to select the performance counter here. So let's move on with the performance counter, which is highlighted in the red box there with the arrow mark. So once we will click the next, you will have a different window open there. And in this particular slide you can see that what are available counters which are there to define. So for example, in this screenshot you can see the processor information, RAS port. So if you will drag down or this bar up or down, you will find out multiple options there related to memory, CPU, processor, network card, or the other OS settings. So those are there. So you just click on add, and you also have to pick the sample interval. By default it's 15 second whenever you configure those data counter sets. By default it's 15 second, but I do not think that 15 second is a good option to go with, because here when you will get the data, it will the particular sample intervals with 15 seconds, and you will not get the exact data to analyze, and there will be major chunks of those particular counters. So probably we should go with 1 minute to 10 minutes, right? So in the next slide I explained that at least 1 minute or maybe 10 to 15 minutes, but generally we should go with 1 to 2 minutes for the the data which will be helpful for the troubleshooting. For example, if you are setting counters for 1 hour, then you should go with the 1 or 2 minute of the interval there, so that you have 30 data points for within an hour to troubleshoot for any particular counter which you are going to set there, maybe it processor or the memory or anything. So when you select any counter there to set, for example here we are choosing the processor. So under process there are multiple points which you can select, like time, C1 time, then C2 time, that is cycle 1 time, cycle 2 time, cycle 3 time. So if you want to know what exactly is this particular counter, how it works, so just go to that, just follow that arrow mark, red arrow mark, and if you see there is a show description button. So if you will check that option, then you will come to know in detail that what exactly that particular counter is all about. For example, this processor counter, this is for the processor performance object, consists of the counters that measure aspect of processor activity. So same way you can read about each and every counter there which are there. So let me explain what exactly we are going to set in this particular data counter set. So we are going here, I have selected 4 major data points there. One is memory page per seconds, physical disk queue length, and processor time. So these particular counters related to processor, disk, and memory will give us the idea that on that particular time when we have configured those data counter set, what was the uses of these particular resources on that server. I have also covered one more one more point here, which is VM memory. So you will probably not see that option if you are working on a physical server, but your server is, if your server is a virtual server, then you can also measure your virtual memories as well. So here you can see I have set the sample interval as 1 minute. Then after in next slide, once you add those counters, you need to pick one by one whatever counter you need. But here I will go with the memory, physical disk and processor with 1 minute of sample interval. Then you have to choose the root directory where exactly you want to save the data which you are going to generate with the help of this tool. So you can pick any directory, like here for example I have picked my D drive of that server, then Hariom folder and perform data. So another point here is that if you think that you are going to run that performance counter for 2-3 hours continuously on any server, then we must not select the C drive for the data, to save the data, because once you select the C drive, it generates a huge chunk of data there, and there are probability that your C drive will be full and it will run out of space. So just to avoid any issues, any further issues because of the space on in the C drive or OS drive, we must choose any different drive here. Okay, then there is a different option. Once you will select this, once you will go with the next option, there will be an option to run as. So run as, that option is there, which you need to select if you are using, if you want to use this particular tool on that particular server or different server, or if you do not have admin rights to collect the data, then you can change your credential and you can use your admin credential there. So I already have admin credential on this server where I'm gonna run this setting, so I probably will go with the default setting there. That is not required for me. Okay, next let's move to the next slide, which talks about the settings of the collector properties. So once you have that data collector set, if you can see that data collector set, then user defined, where you right clicked and created a new data collector set with the name data collector set Hariom. So there you have that window open. If you will right click and go to properties, you need to right click on the data collector set which you recently created, and you will go to properties. So there will be option like general, directories, security, schedule, stop, connection and task. So for the general tab, you can fill in the description. For example, I just entered there like being collected for documentation purpose, but here if you can fill in the details as whatever appropriate for your case while you will set up the data collector set. So after the general after this detail in properties, if you will go to the next tab, which is directory, you need to set the directory where the data will be saved, which we have already picked as D, Hariom, and the perform data. And also you can select the subdirectory name format. What will be the name once you will have those data collector set? So the date format I have chosen here is like year, then month, day, and then the time as well. And if you will click on that particular tab which is there for prefix directory with computer name, then whatever the files will be created with the logs, that will have that server name included in that particular data file, the output file. Okay, so another option here is for the schedule. So as we discussed that when we create any data collector set, it's not only about that real-time monitoring. Yes, we can do the real-time monitoring with this tool and we can get the data, but if you think your shift will be over and customer says that the particular issue on that server happens after every 4 hours or 5 hours for 30 minutes or 40 minutes, so you have that option that you can schedule that particular data collector set to collect the logs for you automatically. You do not have to log in all the time and start it manually. So you can set up the schedule according to your requirement or the description from the user or requester that when exactly that problem occurs on that particular server. So here for example, I was when I was logged into that server, it was 11th August. So I set the date from 11 to 12, but that depends on your situation, so you need to make correction accordingly. So here you can also pick the days. For example, if user says it's only on the weekends or only on the weekdays, so you need to pick accordingly. And the time as well, you need to pick the time as well, at what time it should launch those data collector set to grab the data from performance data from the server for you against the counters which you chose. Like here I have gone with the memory, CPU and hard drive data, hard drive performance, storage performance. Okay, so let's move on to next slide now. So just if once you go to next option for data collector set, so that will be there will be an option what will be the log file name. For example, here data collector log 01 and the time format. So you can also append the log mode. It's on you if you require. And you will find the example file name, how it will be generated here. So in this case, but in this particular case, if you have the prefix the server name, then it will be there on the output file. Okay, so once we are done with the setting, then we in the last slide, if you see, that was the last option. And once you apply and you have provided the schedule, you have provided the path where you have to store the data. So that's it, we are done with the configuration of the data collector set. So once again, let's come to the slide where I was showing you the very first thing about the data collector set, that which particular area we need to cover. So as a fresher or as an experienced Windows administrator, Windows Server administrator, you must know that all those memories, processor or CPU components which are there to monitor, we can pick accordingly whatever you think at that point of time that they might be having some issues at that particular time on that server. So here I have gone just with the memory, physical disk, processor and VM memory, which is probably not required in the case of any physical server. So here just to refresh again, you can have the details for any counter in the show description tab, and the description itself will explain you what exactly is that particular counter and what kind of the details the output file will be providing you. So okay, so as we already explained how to configure, and we are done with the schedule and and the directory where data will be generated. So you will be here, and under the reports you will see user defined data collector set, the same name which we set for the data collector set. Like here I have written Hariom. I chose Hariom with my name just for the example. So here you will see one of the option there, and data collector set, but there will be no window which here in the right side panel it says collecting data. That will not be there. For that, in this particular example, because just for the lab purpose, I was not waiting for any schedule. I just right clicked on the data collector set Hariom and then just started this manually. But as I said, you can schedule according to your requirement for that particular time where you think that system has issues. Okay guys, so as this particular data controller set which we started, we will let it run for some time, for example 1 hour, and it depends on the situation or the schedule which you have configured. Maybe you have configured for 2 hours or 1 hour or 30 minutes with the time interval as per your requirement. So here we have gone with the 1 minute of time interval, and we let it run for around 1 hour. So once you are done, once the data collector is going on, and because here it was I ran it manually, so I'll stop it after some time, for example 1 hour or some time. So now once you will stop the counter, it will show you the final this kind of graph here on your which is there on your screen, and you will find that all those parameters which we have configured for memory, processor time, disk queue length or pages per second, so all those counters are there, and that data which is there, that has been saved in the directory which we will review in coming slides. So all those parameters we are now the graph is complete, and we will study the data, how to study that data in the next slide. So next slide, uh, first we have to export the data in the Excel sheet. So you have that file saved on that particular location, on that particular directory which was configured during the data collector set configuration. You will go to that particular location and you will right click on that particular file, and you will or in that particular graph which is there, you will right click on that graph itself, and then you can select the option save data as. So in case you have configured the schedule, then it will be there in your directory, but if you are running it manually, then you can also use the same graph. You will right click and you will click on save data as. So once you will click on save data as, it will you have to change the type to text file, which is comma decimated csv file .csv file. So because in CSV file the data will be there in the Excel format, which we will analyze in some meaningful format going forward. So you have the CSV file here for this particular example with the name, I saved it as data underscore documentation underscore set dot CSV. So now let's go to Excel. We will open that CSV file. Here we need some adjustment in the format as well for that output data. So in column A, the very first column in this Excel sheet, we can change the time format to IST, CST, whatever your requirements are there. So in this particular example, this is the first in this screen, that will be the row data which is with you, but you can modify the headings of those columns so that you can analyze and in some meaningful format. So for example, I have set the time in IST, then all those counters which are we configured, we have the data for those counters. And in the next slide, I'll make you understand how to configure the pivot graphs. So for to read the data in the graphs format, you do not have to be master in Excel. That is very simple activity. You have that Excel sheet open, you will select the complete sheet and you will go to insert tab, then click on pivot tables and select pivot graphs. Once you will select the pivot graph, it will open a window which is there with the red arrow mark. So you just go with the default option and say OK there. Once you will click on OK, it will come up with a different window where you will have the option to select the pivot table fields. So in the pivot table fields, you select the time in the axis field, and for the counters which are there, whatever counter you need to analyze, you need to drag that into the values column. So here in this example, the IST or the whatever the time, because we will read against the time of the performance of that particular processor in this example. So I have dragged IST to the axis field and the count of processor, the processor counter, in the values field. So once we do that and click OK, you will get a graph for the performance of the processor for that particular time period when this counter was running. So in this particular example, you can see the time values in the axis field, and it shows that 11th of August 5:11 the processor utilization, and same after every 1 minute you will or 2 minutes the count it's about the counter interval which you set, you will see the data points there. So if we have 5 minutes of counter, you will see the resource utilization of that particular counter or of after every 5 minutes. So here the utilization of this particular processor on that particular server where we ran this counter, that is quite constant and there is no change. Reason behind there was no spike and there was no such utilization of that server at that time. So that is why this graph is quite normal. I do not see any spike here. But when we have some problematic servers, definitely there will be huge changes in this graph, and you will see major spikes. And when we say major spike, it can be of and it can be with any of the counter. Maybe it's with memory, not CPU, or maybe it's with network counter which you set, or any other counter which is there, for example hard drive or anything. So the same way, if you want to read the counter, if you want to make a graph for memory, you just go to that Excel sheet again, select the time in axis field, and select the memory counter and drag it to values field, or any other parameter which you want to study in graph. So once you have the data with you and you have the graphs with you, then you need to decide which particular counter, which particular component is creating issues with the performance of that particular server. So to describe that, we have five major topics to cover. One is hard disk bottleneck, second memory bottleneck, then processor, process, and network bottleneck, because these are the major component which generally create issues, performance issues with any of the server. So in that particular example, which we were studying the CPU utilization counter, and it was not high because there was no utilization. But when bottleneck occurs, that means resource reaches to its capacity and there is no bandwidth, and it create the performance issues, and it slow down the system. So same way, we once we have all the counters, and we have the output of all those counters which are configured with a schedule, or maybe manually. We need to study them, and we need to see which particular component is has high utilization there. So let's discuss the components which we can configure to find out the issues with the storage or the hard disk which is attached to that particular server. So there are few components. One is a logical disk percentage free space. This particular counter measure the free space of the selected logical drive. So that must be always that must fall below 15% all the time. If that is not 15%, that is not below 15%, that is there's some issues with the space on OS to store critical file, and that system and that particular system require additional space to run the OS properly. So that is a counter which you can use. The second counter, which is basically very handy for the hard drive bottlenecks or hard drive performance, that is physical disk percentage idle time. So if you have set that counter in data collector set, and you generate the graph against that, then you can see if the counter falls below 20%, then the disk system is saturated, right? That is it means if that is not performing well for you, and you need a faster disk system here. So that counter define that. Next counter we can talk about is physical disk average disk read values. So in this particular counter, if the number is larger than 25 milliseconds, that means there is something wrong. So when we say 25 milliseconds, then it means I'm talking about the general server which are not much utilized, like application server or any other normal infrastructure server. But when we come to such server where we have thousands of users logged in at any point of time to access the files, for example Exchange server or SQL server, where we have multiple data to read and write all the time, then this value should be approximately 10 milliseconds. So it differs, right? So if that is larger than 25 for normal server, or for major Exchange or SQL kind of infrastructure server, that is approximately 10 milliseconds, then there is something wrong and you have to get the disk replaced. So this is the counter to get if this is the time to get a faster disk system for your server, and that is a major issue with the performance from the storage side. The next counter which we can talk is physical disk average disk write values. So if you configure that data counter set this value, and you analyze the graph, and you see about around the average time in seconds, which it takes to write data on the disk. If the number is larger than 25 milliseconds, then there must be some latency to write the data on that disk. And if that is the case, then obviously you need to work with your storage team. If the storage is coming from the storage side, for example NAS, SAN, or NFS, and if it's a local drive, then also you need to work with your hardware vendor, and you need to see if there is something wrong with the disk which is attached to that particular server. So these are the counters which we can use to analyze the performance of any hard disk attached to that server. And if bottlenecks occurs, then yes, we have to get the issue fixed by replacing, or replacing that disk, or maybe by with working with the storage team for the improved performance of the storage, or maybe we need to add some additional storage. So next topic, it's about the bottleneck of around the memory. The memory bottleneck. So it's the physical memory which is available on any server. If we have those counters which we are going to discuss, so they will provide you the detail if there is some issue with the memory, or maybe you need additional memory on that server to perform better, or maybe if there is something wrong with that memory, and there is some memory leak issues. So to overcome all those situations and to analyze this data, what counter we can set is like memory page fault per second, or memory page input per second, or memory page read per second. So once you have those counters and you generate the graphs to read the data, so in this particular data, if the requested page is elsewhere in memory, the fault is called a soft page fault. If the requested page must be retrieved from the disk, the fault is called a hard drive page fault. So in the data itself, if you will see that page input per second will be greater than or equal to page read per second, it means there is something wrong. So page input per second and page read per second, that should have the equal values, otherwise it's not good for your system, and you must have some memory leak, or hard page fault rate on that system. A high number of hard page fault may indicate that you need to increase the amount of memory on your system, or maybe you need to increase the cache size of your server. For example, Microsoft recommend 1.5 times of the memory to have as your page file settings, in your page file settings. The next counter we can talk about is memory pool paged per byte and memory pool non-paged bytes. So these counter track the number of bytes in the paged and non-paged pools. The page pool in an area of system memory for object that can be written on disk when they are not used. So when you have any program open on your server or system, and that is stored in your memory on that server. So if that is not in use, then your memory transfer that data to non-paged pools. So this particular counter will provide you the values around these counters, and if you see that the size of non-paged pool is large relative to the total number of virtual memory allocated to that server, then there is definitely requirement to increase the virtual memory size of that server. Otherwise obviously there will be performance issues on that server. So these are the counters which we can have to analyze for the memory issues on any particular server. Okay, so in the next slide we will talk about the processor bottlenecks. So when we say the processor, there are few counters which we can read. I would recommend to go with the processor time, the processor time, that counter that measures the percentage of left time the processor spends executing a non-idle thread. So maybe that is a bit technical for fresher, but whenever you have any program open and that requires CPU, so if you have for example 2 CPU configured on your server, and the total utilization is more than 85% against this counter, that means that process is overwhelmed, and there is a requirement to have another processor with which is much faster than the one which is installed on that server. So the same type, same kind of other counters which you can set is the processor user time, so and the processor interrupt time. So for user time, this particular counter measures the percentage of elapsed time that processor is spent in user mode, right? When if this value is high, if you see the graphs and this, you see this value high, the server is busy with the applications. And one possible solution here is to optimize the application that is using up the processor resource. So maybe that particular process which is running for that application, you need to work, and you may need to uh, set the priority of that particular page in the task from the task manager for that particular time, which is utilizing, or which seems to be resource hungry for that processor for that particular time. So if you will reduce the priority of that process with the help of the application team, then you can overcome that situation. Another counter here is the system processor queue length. So that also indicate the number of thread which or the request which any processor has at any point of time. So if any application generates a number of threads which are in queue for the processor, and your system stops responding to those requests, so if the value is more than 2 times the number of CPU for an extended period of time, that means there is something wrong and you need extra CPU on that particular server for better performance. So these are the counter, basically you can read, and if you read the detail of these counters in in details in that slide which we described, that what exactly the data or what kind of data it will show, that is also there. Okay, let's go to the network bottleneck now. So network, again, that is a very big factor for the performance of any server, because always all the time we have the network configured, we have servers configured over the network, and if we do not have better faster network, or there is no good speed, or there is any issue, obviously we will face the multiple performance issues. So the counter which I recommend here for the network performance, that should be network interface bytes total per second. So this measures the rate at which bytes are sent and received over network adapters. So for example, from your network switch side, there is a different the data which any user is going to push to that server, or going to upload or download, that do not meet the that particular server do not support that much of data, then there is issues, and this counter help us to measure all those values. The network, you discover if that is more than 70%, that is used for more than 70%, then for 100 Mbps NIC, the interface consumed for example 8.7 MB per second. That means it's somewhere around 12.5 MB per second, and it means that is utilized around 70% or somewhere. So in the situation like this, you may want to add the faster network card or the segment from the network side. So you can work with your network administrator, if they have kind of network switch which are supporting major data flow, but here from the server end you do not have the NIC card which is installed there to support that kind of bandwidth. So to overcome that situation, we might need a new network card with the supported data, which can support that much of data to transfer per second. And the next counter which we can discuss for the network, or to analyze the performance of the network, that is network interface output queue length. So this particular counter, this measures the length of the output packet queue. So as you know that whenever there is any upload or download the request to any server over the network, then the data is being sent in the chunks and in the packets. So when the data is being uploaded or downloaded, if the network saturation, if this value is more than 2, then you need to address that problem. If that value is more than 2, that means there is issue with that server. So to address that particular problem, we again need a faster network card, or maybe there is something wrong. If you think that we already have 100 Mbps NIC card and data is less than 50%, but still there's issues, and you still observe the network issues, maybe that there's something wrong with that NIC card, and you might need to get it replaced with your hardware vendor. Again, the next the big thing which can affect the performance of any server is process. So like the processor, memory, or network. So we have the process, we can discuss the process bottleneck as well. So server's performance will be significantly affected if we have a misbehaving process or non-optimized process. So we need to discuss which all processes are running on that particular server at particular point of time, and if there is any issues with those processes. So for that, I'll recommend to go with some data counters like processor handle count. So this particular data counter set, this measures the total number of handles that are currently open by a process. So as you know, in Microsoft OS framework, the all those processes which are running there, they they are running in the threads, and if you have those handles in greater than 10,000, that means there's something wrong, right? So that should be in controlled way, and just analyzing this particular data counter set results, we can see if that particular number is greater than 10,000. That means there's something leak, and that process is not working fine for you. Other counters which you can use is the thread count or the private byte. So in thread counts, the thread leak, to observe if there is a thread leak, the number if the number is more than 500 between the maximum minimum value of threads, that means there is some issue. So these particularly these particular are the threads which we can which are handy to analyze the performance of any server on the basis of process which are running on that server. So I believe that's it with the session today, and we discussed how to configure the data collector set using the Performant tool on any Windows a Microsoft Windows server, and we also discussed that how we can we can configure and how we can make a schedule, how we can configure the schedule to get the data outputs. And we also discussed that how we can analyze the situation where we have the bottlenecks for different components, and in bottleneck situation we need to go with the additional resources, or maybe to get those components changed. So that is all about, and thank you guys for taking time to listening me today. So as you know, we are always you can always approach us, and we are available at www.cloudpathshala.com, which is which is our website, or you can email us at admin@cloudpathshala.com for any queries or suggestion. You can also follow us on YouTube, our YouTube channel. Please do like, subscribe, and share with your friends who are working in this techno world. And just go to Cloud Pathshala on YouTube, or we are available on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google Plus. So you can go on any of these websites, and you can follow us, and you will get all the updates around the next topics as well. Thank you guys. Thanks again for taking time. Thanks a lot.